Hello, and you are back in the Velvet Room with Jokerthefool. This is our 85th episode, and today we'll be discussing what woke means and Red Lobster's bankruptcy is a consequence of the decline of our society. So, you get right into it. If you haven't heard, Assassin's Creed Shadows has been revealed with a CG trailer and very much Ubisoft fashion. They don't like to show gameplay for the games. They just show the CG trailer, trying to get everybody on the hype train. And Ubisoft is probably one of the worst AAA companies, gaming companies. They've really gone downhill, and Assassin's Creed is one of their franchises that has gone downhill along with it. And as such, they have Assassin's Creed Shadows. This is a game that is set in Japan, and the main character, there's two playable characters. The female character, a woman, Japanese woman shinobi. Not a lot of people have problems with that, even though it's not the most historically accurate thing. The shinobis were mostly male, doing the intelligence, those spy operations, and there isn't much of any documentation in history of women doing that thing. But having a Japanese woman do that role, it could be definitely believable, especially if you structure the plot correctly. But what really isn't believable is having the character Yusuke, Yusuke being a black man who came to Japan for 15 months, was one of Oda Nobunaga's, if I'm saying that right, retainers, and was basically lost in battle, surrendered, and was, I think, shipped off to India. We don't know the most about him, but anyway, Ubisoft is having him be the male protagonist, propping him up as this African samurai, and a lot of people feel very strongly about this one way or the other. And this is really what I want to get into, is that there is this complete lack of social and cultural cohesion, and Assassin's Creed Shadows is very much indicative of that, because instead of Ubisoft coming out and revealing the new Assassin's Creed game and people being like, oh, it's really cool, I can't wait to play it in November, it's either if you support it, you're a woke libtard, and if you're against it, then you're a bigoted racist who just, doesn't want black people in media, or whatever it is. And this is where I want to get into with being woke, is because people make the argument that when you use the term woke or describe things as being woke, it means it has a woman in it, or it has someone who isn't white in it, and that's really what it isn't. And I don't like saying things are woke and all that, but it is in the lexicon of humanity now. It's how we're describing things. But when I say things are woke, when I talk about these sorts of things, it is when the race and the identity of a character is the most important thing, where a piece of media or whatever it is inherently better or inherently quality because of the fact that it features people who are high up on the progressive stack, like race being the highest, most important thing on the progressive stack. As in Assassin's Creed Shadows is a better game because it has Yusuke as the prominent African samurai, right? If you're going to have a game that takes place in Japan, the character you should play as should both be Japanese, right? The female character Japanese. People have a problem with that. Being like a Japanese woman shinobi, that's a much more believable. It's a very realistic thing that could happen. But having Yusuke, who was this historical figure, as in he has historical documentation, someone who's existed in history, not like the other characters, playable characters in Assassin's Creed that were fictional. You had like Ezio Auditore, you had Edward Conway, and these were fictional characters, but they were believable for the setting that they were in. Yusuke is this character that has historical, he was existed in real life, so he's part of history. But the way they're going to depict him in history most likely is going to be as a samurai, when was not a samurai, right? Was a retainer at most. Don't really know that much about him, but if you want to make a game, Assassin's Creed game, that features black people prominently, you could have it take place in Africa, right? You could have it take place in like sub-Saharan Africa, Mozambique, South Africa, Ethiopia, something like that, and have a very well-made Assassin's Creed game that has an entirely black cast. It wouldn't make sense for it to not have a black cast. It was an Assassin's Creed game set in Africa, but the determination is to make this character, have him be prominently featured as a samurai, an African samurai, right? Because it's the progressive thing to do. Anyone who criticizes it can be shrugged off as a racist, and Ubisoft can get away with charging you $130 to get the premium version of the game, where you get to play it 3 days early, you get some bullshit pre-order bonuses, but what they really want is you to pay $18 a month every month for the rest of your life, so you can consume the thing and get excited for the next thing, right? That is what the gaming industry wants. They want you to subscribe to their subscription services. That's why Game Pass is a thing. That's why Ubisoft and EA have their subscription services. To why PlayStation Network, you got PlayStation Plus. It's basically just give them money on a monthly basis so they don't have to actually sell a product to you, right? They just have your money, and then they'll give you something to keep you on that subscription train. And that's what really Ubisoft is invested in, and that's what I dislike. And it's also just the fact that, Assassin's Creed has gone downhill probably ever since 4. You had Assassin's Creed Unity, which was broken from day one, had all this awful monetization stuff. I had Odyssey. Origins was pretty good. It made it like a more of an RPG experience, but Ubisoft has this like issues with rubber banding, and they still have all this awful monetization, and all the games coming out being glitchy and bugged. But some of them are a bit hit or miss. But to me, everything after Assassin's Creed 4 isn't really worth engaging with. So I liked 2 a lot, I liked 4 a lot, but these, the idea of having Assassin's Creed where you have the animus that allows you to explore the memories of your ancient ancestors, and that's how the premise, for Assassin's Creed. So you had this character Desmond Miles, who goes into the animus and he relives the memories of his ancestor Ezio Auditore da Firenze, and I think Alad, or whatever the guy's name in the first Assassin's Creed was. I can't say because I did not play. I played 2. I liked that game. I really liked that game when I was younger. Back, the 360 was a thing, and that was the idea of it. So if you're going to have an Assassin's Creed game, it's supposed to be where it's this vein of fiction running through historical reality, right? So if you're going to feature a character that actually existed in history and depict them inaccurately, and you're only doing it because it's for the cause, right? This isn't really something that's being done because this is just the best story for them to tell, right? This is something that's being done because it's the progressive thing to do. It's the righteous thing to do. It's the politically correct thing to do, right? And if you wanted to have a game that featured black people prominently, an Assassin's Creed game that featured black people prominently, that did right to what Assassin's Creed was as a franchise, like what built Assassin's Creed as a franchise, like you're thinking like, Assassin's Creed 1 and 2 and, 3 and 4 as well, where you have the animus, exploring the memories of your ancient ancestors. So it's supposed to be somewhat historically accurate, but of course you've got these fictionalized elements, but they're supposed to be believable for the setting that it's in, right? You have, all this stuff with the Templars and the Assassins and all this like supernatural stuff going on, and that's, definitely fictional, but it can be inserted into history and be believable, right? You could definitely have that with an Assassin's Creed game set in Africa, and you could have an all-black cast, and not a lot of people would get mad about, but that's the thing, right? Like I said before, there is this complete lack of social and cultural cohesion because of stuff getting like this being pulled, right? Where instead of like, hey, there's a cool video game, people can bond over it and get excited for it, it's, either you support it and you're a woke libtard, or you're against it and you're an evil racist bigot, right? Or you're not saying you're a bigot, but you just have to admit it, because when you say that the Japanese game shouldn't feature an African samurai because that's not historically accurate, and that's not even what a samurai is. A samurai, it's feudal Japan, where you had to be born into that class to be a samurai. Like you had to be a family that had the right, the land, I guess, ownership, and that noble like lineage to be a samurai. Or it's like very much like the medieval Europe, this feudal society where it was built on these ingrained relationships with the strict social hierarchy. You have the shogun, and you have the you have the shogunate and the samurai and all of those clans, and then all the samurai, all the peasants that serve under them. In the same way, you would have the lord, and he has his manor, and he has the knights that protect his manor. Then you have all the serfs that are under the care and protection of the lord and the knights. And if you're in any one of those social strata, you're really not, you're not going from serfdom to knighthood. In the same way, if you're just a rice farmer, you're not going to become a samurai, right? Because you weren't born into that family, right? And that's the idea of what being a samurai is. Definitely during the Sengoku period as well. And that's the issue that people have is if you're going to have an Assassin's Creed game set in Japan, you would want it to be as historically realistic as possible while taking those liberties, but to take the liberties and say this person that actually existed in history who was not a samurai. There's not really any documentation of him being a samurai, and to make him a samurai so you can say, oh, he's an African samurai, even though there has been inspiration of him having him be an African samurai, but I think a lot of this is very much just being generous with fiction. And again, if this is a good game, if Ubisoft is actually turning one around and people like it, sure, but this is not something that I think Ubisoft is doing to get goodwill from people. I definitely think it's more or less just to keep that social cohesion from forming as much as possible, right? Because people aren't getting hyped for the cool Assassin's Creed game set in Japan. It's all about this decision that they're making. Again, very much an active one to make this decision. I had to get over and approved, and all the comparisons that people are making, I think, are a bit asinine. You have like The Last Samurai, and that's not even a movie where like Tom Cruise is in it. Tom Cruise playing an American captain who goes to Japan and helps the samurai rebel against the Meiji Restoration, which was abolishing the samurai as a class. Based on history, it was originally supposed to be like it was the French doing it, but Hollywood has to have name recognition, so they have Tom Cruise do it, and that's its own thing. But that's a different plot, and then it's a different thing entirely. It's not like Tom Cruise was a samurai in that movie. And the same thing with the game Nioh, which one was made by Team Ninja, a Japanese developer, and it has a historical figure who's pursuing another person, but I don't think he's presented in Nioh as being a samurai. It's just being this character that exists, and it's also very much a fantasy setting. Like you have all the yokai in that game, and it's very much not something meant to be like an accurate depiction of history at all, whereas Assassin's Creed really got its appeal by being this like I said, this vein of fiction running through history. That's how the developers described it, and that's what got people into it. That's what got me into it. It's the idea that you have this animus and that you get to explore the memories of your ancient ancestors, right? And that's the interesting thing. And then you had this plot laid on top of it with Sturco Industries, the assassins versus the Templars, and that made things very interesting. But you're not paying homage to that historical aspect of Assassin's Creed if you're going to take a character that actually exists in history and depict them inaccurately because it makes you seem more righteous for the cause to have an African samurai, right? This idea of like absolute black excellence, where black people invented and are responsible for everything good in society, and it's only because of the evil white man that it's not depicted as such in reality, right? That's not everybody who's arguing against the woke, right? But it's definitely an idea in society. But I've been ranting on this far too long, 13 minutes, almost an entire episode of this podcast on just the first topic. But we're going to move on to the second topic. Like, comment, subscribe. If you're still sticking with me, I appreciate you. Also, Conspiracy Theory Week Part 2 is going on for Velvet Room Publishing for the, I think 901 to 907, I believe, are going to be daily polls structured around conspiracy theories. So I did one on Pearl Harbor, I did one on chemtrails, and there's going to be a whole bunch of others. I did this one in December of 23, that first series of polls. A lot of it featured musicians, but check out the daily poll. It's going to be conspiracy theories. You want to get your conspiracy theory game on. But we're going on to the last topic of the day, if you're still sticking with me. It's about Red Lobster. I got this article from I believe it's USA Today. Headline reads, Red Lobster files for bankruptcy days after closing dozens of locations across the U.S. So this happened just after Mother's Day. If you don't know, Mother's Day is like the biggest day of business for Red Lobster. So that's when they make the most amount of money. So they kept those locations open for Mother's Day, got as much revenue as they possibly could, and then they had to close it down. So they're filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. And the biggest thing is that the company filed this bankruptcy petition, and they estimate that its assets and liabilities are both worth between $1 and $10 billion. So they have, at best, they are completely break even. They have $1 billion in assets, $1 billion in liabilities. What's most likely the case is that they have like barely $1 billion in assets, and they owe like up to $10 billion. So they probably are in the hole in like the 8 figures, if that's what I'm correct, right with billions. So they owe literally billions of dollars to their creditors. So of course they're filing for bankruptcy, and this is indicative of what I was speaking before when I was mentioning the pandemic savings Americans had was completely gone. So the consumer class, and which or the consumer economy that America is. We are a consumer economy. Our economy is based on the fact that people buy things, not just from the U.S., the services, but goods from China, and that's what keeps the global economy going. But it's, the service industry, the restaurant industry, all this is, consumerism, being able to go out to eat every day or at least every week. People aren't able to do that as much anymore, if at all, and companies like Red Lobster are suffering because they can't do they're not doing as much business, so they're not getting as much revenue, so they're losing money. And there's also a whole bunch of mismanagement. I think they had like 5 CEOs in the last 5 years. They lost $11 million in the third quarter of 2023 because they had this ultimate endless shrimp, and people would come in, pay $20 and just eat all the shrimp. So it was just very much the fact that Red Lobster is indicative of the fact that, one, the consumer class is not able to consume as much, and you have all this mismanagement and Red Lobster. It seems like it's a complete dumpster fire from the management, from the business decisions that they're making, the fact that they're just taking on all this debt. They have literally billions of dollars to their creditors, so they're really stuck in a hole that they're probably not going to be able to get out of, and it's going to be pretty likely that they won't survive this bankruptcy long. They won't either survive this bankruptcy, or Red Lobster is going to fold after it's sold to whoever it gets sold to. So you might just get the case where it gets sold to their vendors and their creditors, and they just liquidate whatever they have left. They close all the locations, they take all the equipment, auction it off, because they've been auctioning it off with the locations that they've closed so far. So you just have someone that doesn't say like, hey, we're not going to run this, right? It's a dead brand. People don't want to engage with it as much. The restaurant industry is going down the tubes because, like I said before, people can't afford to go out to eat every week, or some people do every day, but people like to go out to eat once a week on the weekends, do stuff like that, for fun, have a good time. But people don't have that room in their budgets anymore. They don't have that money in their savings anymore because of this rampant inflation that we've been dealing with, because 2020 we decided to up the money supply by 30%, and we didn't think it was going to do anything, or we had to do it because we just had to have those lockdowns, right? It was completely necessary, and if I say anything else, man, YouTube is going to axe me down. But anyway, that's really what I wanted to point out with Red Lobster. It's just very much indicative of these things I've been talking about, this societal decline, the fact that there's a lot of mismanagement from the bottom up economically. Individuals are taking out as much debt as they possibly can and not having the revenue to pay it off, the income to pay it off. And a lot of these businesses are doing the same exact thing. Debt up to their eyeballs, don't have the revenue, and every business decision they're making is just losing them money. But with that, I hope you enjoyed this episode. This was a really long one. Hope you stuck with me, and thank you for being a podcast listener. Even if it's your first time, I appreciate you, and we're going into the outro now. Thank you for being in the Velvet Room with Jokerthefool. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, whether you're listening on YouTube, Rumble, Odyssey, or Substack, and be sure to subscribe to my Substack, velvetroompublishing.substack.com to keep up with Machine to Man and all my other projects.